Good afternoon. Welcome to the January 5th, 2024 Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust meeting. I'll now call the meeting to order. Item 2 on the agenda are the minutes from the November 21st, 2023 meeting. If we have no questions or comments, we can take a motion. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And the item passes. Brings us to item 3 on the agenda, the ratification of claims. We can take a motion in a second. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. That item is passed as well. Brings us to item 4 on the agenda, the items for individual consideration. Item 4A is the resolution of the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust approving a minor amendment to the amended and restated Downtown Maps Economic Development Project Plan. Mr. Sudol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joanne is going to walk us through this, but I just want to make a quick comment that really this item is related to the next couple of items in setting the budget and the TIF project plan. So Joanne is going to run you through the changes.
Yeah, so what we've got on the screen, Nicole, if you'll scroll up just a little bit, we've got an amendment to TIF 2 and to TIF 8. Scroll down and grab that budget section. There you go. So both of these are net zero budget amendments in order to accommodate the next two items. Like Kenny said, we're reducing residential and hotel commercial by $20 million total in order to add $20 million to other public development costs to facilitate the multipurpose stadium item. And then on the next page, we've got the budget for TIF 8, where we're reducing other economic developments budget, which if you all will remember, that's the budget category that allows us to attract headquarters downtown. We're going to reduce that by $1 million to accommodate the Myriad Gardens projects, which is item C on your agenda. This is considered a minor budget amendment, and the project plan grants the Economic Development Trust the authority to approve minor amendments, so this will be kind of the last step for this item.
Any comments or questions? If not, we can take a motion on item 4A. We have a motion and a second.
Do you want me to enter? Okay.
And the item passes. Brings us to item 4B on the agenda. This is a joint resolution approving an allocation of $20 million of TIF 2 and $10 million in Omni Revenue Stabilization Funds to the City for Maps 4 multipurpose stadium project costs and rescinding the allocation of $16 million from TIF 2 to the Strawberry Fields project. Mr. Sudol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to set the stage for this. There's several things going on in this resolution. The headline on this is that this would be providing $30 million of additional funds to add to the MAPS 4 multipurpose stadium project. So just as a little bit of background on this, we're going to pull up a couple of slides from the original 2019 presentations that were done to City Council for the MAPS 4 project here. So if you'll move forward, Joanna, real quickly. Originally, when this was proposed in MAPS 4, so the background on this was there were really two options presented. An option that was a $37 to $42 million option, and an option that was a $67 to $72 million option. And we're going to talk briefly about kind of some of the differences on those options. But one thing before we go there, wanted to talk about that the decision at the time in MAPS 4 that was made was to fund that at the lower level. And in addition to that, want to point out that there was also not really any funding or mechanism in MAPS 4 for the land. It was really funded originally in the, I believe it was $37 million, and then later on in MAPS, there was a reallocation process when they had some better than expected collections where that number moved up to 41. So where it is today, in MAPS 4, the stadium has $41 million allocated to it with no other provision for land or anything like that. So we want to run through these options really quick. So option one, originally as planned was that would be an 8,000 seat arena, and really the thought behind this, it would be something that would be of the level to provide for professional and college soccer. It would also be able to host concerts, and there's kind of another rendering there with some concerts. It would be able to host high school events, other sporting events, etc. And really this was sort of the minimum or the base level to be able to provide, a lot of those types of events. So there's another option here, and these again were the original slides. The other option would give you a higher level of amenities, shade structures, more seats, better suites, better restrooms, better stages, etc. So I do want to caveat, just we all know what's happened in the world, that, and with every project, will we get exactly to this option 2? Not sure yet. This still has to be designed. I'm going to talk about why we're bringing some funding forward before we get the design done on this here in a second. But it's likely that this would put us, today somewhere between option 1 and option 2. So I want to talk very briefly about why we're bringing this forward right now. So we have an opportunity, and the team has an opportunity and has some options on the land to purchase land in the producers co-op area. So there's a couple of reasons why I think this is a real positive. One, I think all of us really desire to have this stadium located downtown, not just for soccer, but also for concerts and other events. Two, I think this is an area that has sat undeveloped for quite a while, and I'm really excited about using this public project, much like we've used other MAPS projects and other public projects in the past, to be a catalyst for the private development. It's really exciting when you kind of look over there. There's challenges and other things, with infrastructure and things we're going to have to figure out, but it's a blank canvas right now, and it'd be really exciting if we could create a district around this. So, I think the other reason that the intent would be that they would purchase the land and donate that as their contribution in, and you all know that land is not cheap downtown, so this is an expensive proposition for them, and that's part of the urgency on this, is they've got a pretty short timeline to be able to purchase the first pieces of property for the stadium, which would be late spring, early summer, and just quite frankly, as I would be if I were in their shoes, they want some assurances that we're going to have a professional level stadium that would be successful. A couple of other comments, just things people may be curious about. They are also still in the process of negotiating the operating agreement on this, and pursuant to the MAPS 4 resolution. This would have to be something that's similar to the Bricktown Baseball Park, where it's something where they manage, it within the expenses and revenues that are generated. There'll likely be some revenue sharing, but again, caveat, that's something that is still being finalized. There also would be a long-term lease with the team to play there. Again, that is being finalized, but it would probably have options that would get it up to somewhere around 25 years. In addition, I do want to point out, this is essentially an allocation to ourselves. So, while there's still a lot of agreements and other things that need to be done, if there were, worst case scenario, something were to go awry, the city's still protected, and that this is not tied to the team or tied to, it's tied to the project. So the city has a project that has to go somewhere. Couple of other things was this was heard by the TIF review committee yesterday and recommended for unanimously for approval, and it still has to go through the MAPS 4 process. So it still has to go through the committees, the advisory board recommendations, the design process, and we've put the timeline that's in the current MAPS 4 implementation plan up there, which would be, begin design this year, theoretically begin construction in late 2025, early 2026. That's what's in the current plan now. Don't know if those things will change. feel like I had one more. Oh, I want to talk about the funding. So 20 million from TIF 2. We do want to address that we feel very good that what we have looked at, Joanna and staff have looked at that, and we've estimated all of our collections. As a reminder, TIF 2 ends in 2026. We'll still have some collections beyond that as they come in arrears. We've looked at not only the debt outstanding, all the other obligations, et cetera, and there is sufficient funds for this. There still would be some funds left over in TIF 2 above and beyond that to continue to do other projects potentially. The other 10 million, it comes from what's known as the Omni Revenue Stabilization Fund. So as a reminder on that, as part of the deal we did with Omni, the city council passed a resolution whereby it was created a basket of different revenues that went into a fund to make sure there's money there always to pay the debt obligations associated with the Omni debt that the city issued. Within that, it was always contemplated that the plan was we were trying to put more money in there than what was needed and being conservative with that to make sure we always had enough money to pay that debt. So there's a provision that if that number goes above 2 years worth of debt service, that those funds could be used for other lawful economic development purposes, and this is one of those purposes. So there would still be money sufficient in that fund to cover not just the obligations, but have a couple of years balance in there as well. And that's something that it also gives the finance department, Joanna, the ability to kind of manage that cash and transfer the funds as needed. Obviously we don't need the funds today, but allows them to manage that. In addition, there's a project that we had all had done an allocation on to Strawberry Fields, which we were never able to come to an agreement on an economic development agreement with them, and so that project has stalled out. We're no longer moving forward on that, and this also provides for the rescinding of that allocation, which further ensures that's not an obligation sitting out there that we have to fund in the future. So happy to answer any other questions. That's the next step would be going to City Council.
You mentioned Mayor Norrick's TIF Review Committee took a look at this yesterday. Were there any protests, any concerns raised at that meeting?
No, sir, and I think, there were some questions, just the mayor with his experience wanted to know a lot of things about, is this going to create real heavy subsidies or things to the city? And the answer was that is still being negotiated, but it's likely, it's going to be like the Bricktown ballpark that they have to live within, the operations and what's
Similar
generated.
to the baseball team?
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
all right, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? No?
Chairman, I have a question.
yes.
So I'm clear on the sources of funds. I'm still wanting clarity on the uses of funds. And this $30 million figure, without a designated operator or contractor, where did the figure come from? And then are the uses, looking at the original MAPS 4 request, there's obviously a detailed budget. What is really driving that 30 million? Are there changes to just because of the design? We want more amenities? I'm just a little bit,
The 30 million only goes towards the construction of it does not go towards operations, only the construction of the multipurpose stadium. So it would be added to the current 41 million. So it would give a total construction budget, design and construction budget of 71 million for the stadium. I would say it's from one, obviously all of us know there's been inflation and things, but the big driver is really just wanting to have more amenities, wanting it to be, I would tell you probably there's a lot of folks that would want even more funding to this type of thing. If you think about what kind of stadium can you build in today's environment for 71 million, it's still going to be nice, it's going to be professional level, but there's always a desire for more amenities to make the team more successful, make the events more successful.
okay. So we're landing somewhere in between design-wise, between the original option 1 and option 2. Will that include shades or?
Funding wise, it's where the original option 2 was. I just wanted to caveat that we all know the reality is it likely this ends up somewhere in between those two. And that's part of how the city and the MAPS 4 office will manage it. They'll have a budget and they will manage to that budget. They'll design it and then in turn value engineer if needed to get it within that budget.
Okay. And then my second question, well, maybe third, but so far as the team, kind of you phrase it as a donation. So is this an equity contribution, or are they actually giving ownership of the land, or is there going to be a ground lease? Can you?
The intent will be it will be donated and then conveyed to the city.
Okay.
And the city would own it, and the city will own the
The structure.
stadium, the land, and the improvements.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. If not, we can go ahead and take a vote on item 4B. We have a motion and a second. The item passes. Brings us to item 4C on the agenda. This is a joint resolution approving an allocation to the City of Oklahoma City in an amount not to exceed $1 million from TIF 8 for improvements at the city-owned Myriad Gardens Crystal Bridge. Mr. Siddle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maureen is here to give us a presentation on what these funds would go toward. And like the previous item, this item was also presented at the TIF Review Committee yesterday, and they unanimously recommended it moving forward.
All right, well, good afternoon. Well, before I get into the details, I would just like to give a very brief update on the renovation that was completed a year ago. We opened the bridge after a very extensive renovation, November 18th of 22, and so it's been over a full year now. I'm happy to say it's really has exceeded our expectations in visitorship and visitor feedback. We had budgeted about $600,000 in ticket sales for the new opening, and we're just shy of $1 million now. So it's been well received by the public, and I think everybody is very pleased with the investment of nearly $11 million that was put into it. And that was, again, our public-private partnership. The city contributed roughly $6 million, and we raised nearly $5 million as our part in the project. So everything's been working very well except for the high heat levels in the Crystal Bridge. On a day like today, it's wonderful. August, not so much. We installed some temperature sensors on all 3 levels of the Crystal Bridge. And your handout, if you'd like to dive into the details of the temperatures at 85 degrees, 90, 95, 100, and up, you can see that on all the levels, it gets to be increasingly uncomfortable. Obviously, as the heat rises, the temperature outside, inside, and by the afternoon, especially when it's over 85, 90 degrees, it's not really comfortable to be in there. And in some cases, it can be almost unsafe for the elderly or folks with health issues. So our issue here today is find a way to find a solution to that. So year-round, and especially from May through October, we can have a really quality visitor experience for people in the bridge, and also keep it open all year, have more rentals, have better gift shop sales, with more moderated temperature levels. So how we would like to do that is a couple of phases. It's not inexpensive, but it is the next investment that's needed to fully finish the renovation of the Crystal Bridge. So the first phase, which could happen immediately upon approval, is replacing all of our old air handling units. And there's about 9 or 10 to replace, which would then outfit us with all new of these units, which help modulate temperature in the bridge. And that can get us immediate relief for this coming season. That cost is the $1 million which you're looking at today. And if approved, those monies, I understand, are available very quickly. We could get these purchased and hopefully have them installed by early June, maybe a little bit earlier, and that would really help this year to have a great season in there and beyond. That will regulate temperatures to a certain point, But to really get the Crystal Bridge usable all year round and expand all those uses I mentioned, there's another phase, and that's to get chilled water system hooked up to these new air handling units. And that chilled water system takes some advanced work to do the engineering, the construction documents, to trench and add the connection to chilled water. And so the air handling units have to be there before that happens. So that's the sequence of how we'd like that to work. So we're working on getting updated estimates for that to hopefully bring to you at another meeting. But today, it's to get the air handling units hopefully approved. Any questions?
Questions, comments? All right, if not, oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Maureen, is there an assurance that the chilled water system will do the trick?
Yes, the city actually commissioned a study from ADG engineers who worked on our project and Blatt engineers, and they did a fairly intensive study, and they feel that with the air handling units, we can moderate the temperatures anywhere from about 9 degrees to 14 degrees. That's dependent on humidity levels in the Crystal Bridge. The higher the humidity, the less cooling effect there will be. But that's a pretty good increase. And so they've studied air circulation and the capacity of these air handling units and so on. And the next step, they've also done an engineering study on that. And that they think that will bring it closer to 20 degrees of moderation. So that would really get it to be comfortable on all levels, even on some pretty warm days.
Thank you.
Chairman, quick question. As a frequent visitor, I guess I'm asking more out of curiosity, will this project resort in a temporary closure of the facility? Will you all have to close the gardens to do this replacement?
Well, there'll be some disruption, especially the chilled water part of the project where they have to trench and put in some lines. And so there'll be just some aesthetic disruptions outside, pathways closed. Once, I'm not sure, when they actually go to connect it, that part, my guess is we'd probably have to close for some time, but I wouldn't see it's for more than a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Something like that. Those are all the details we have to be looking at, but the water goes in, the air handlers are already there. If they're approved, there's a connection made. So that part of it is the last part. The part about trenching and bringing it in, that's more disruptive to the grounds, but we can still have the Crystal Bridge open. So it shouldn't be long, I don't think.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we can go ahead and take a motion on item 4C. I have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And the item passes. Brings us to item 4D on the agenda, the amended and restated economic development agreement with Liberty Bell OK LLC for assistance in development financing not to exceed $765,000 in support of the NOVA project. Mr. Siddle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a project that was already approved by this body and the City Council back in 2022, started in August 22, went through the process, and Council had the final approval January of 23. There's been a couple of changes here, and so really this is just an amended and restated economic development agreement. I'm going to go very briefly through the changes. It is changing the entity because there was a change in the partners on this project, and this was a project that had a little bit of a stall, but it's back on track. And if you'll recall, this is what we all referred to as the NOVA project. It's the old Stowe office building where they're converting it to a full-service grocery, food hall type of thing. It was going to have a greenhouse on top of the parking. It was going to have 20 apartment units. So the changes are bringing in the new partner entity. The greenhouse will now be replaced by pickleball courts. and I think they're moving from 20 units to 24 residential units. Otherwise, it's still a, 24 million plus capital investment. The incentives on this have not changed. What we had approved prior was just 100% of the remaining TIF they had. This is in TIF number 2. So it was anticipated they might get 2 years of TIF. So, that may still be the case. It may only be 1 year, but in any case, it's capped at 100% of whatever actual taxes are generated, not to exceed the $765,000. So the incentives have not changed. We just needed to bring this back for the change in the project and the partnership.
So I assume putting the pickleball on top of the garage, they'll have some safety nets there, right? I mean,
Won't chase your ball.
well, I could picture Stone Cipher like flying off the edge of the building there trying to.
I'm not 100% sure, but I would assume so. We could get you that answer.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right, we can take a vote on item 4D. We have a motion and a second. The item passes. Brings us to item 4E, Economic Development Agreement with Jurassic Games 2 LLC for a pay-for-performance film incentive agreement not to exceed $33,753 for the proposed feature film project, Project Dino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this was one that the allocation was approved back in August. So this is the Economic Development Agreement, pretty standard Economic Development Agreement, nothing out of the ordinary, just a couple of points. Again, the incentive would be only $33,753. Has the production, the majority of the production being in Oklahoma City, et cetera. Pretty standard stuff.
Any questions? All right, if not, we can take a motion on item 4E. I have a motion and a second. The item passes. Brings us to item 5 on the agenda, the General Manager's Report. Ms. McSpadden?
I will try to get through this without coughing. I apologize. The only thing I wanted to point out was if you take a look at TIF 2, TIF 8, and TIF 10, you'll see that those cash balances are pretty healthy for all three of those to cover the projects that we've discussed today. So I just kind of wanted to point that out. And again, like TIF 2, we said we've got a little over 21 million in cash right now, and we've got 4 more years of ad valorem collections to go. And so we feel cash-wise we're in a good position. Happy to answer specific questions if anybody has any.
Nope, thank you very much. All right, item 6 on the agenda are comments from staff. Do we have any comments from trustees? Have any citizens signed up to speak? No. All right, that brings us to item 7. We are adjourned.
Thank you all.